Our first speaker for today, CC Chapman. CC is a writer, professional speaker, photographer, and explorer. CC loves traveling the world and sharing his experiences. He is co-author of the book Content Rules, and his next book, Amazing Things Will Happen, A Real-World Guide to Success and Happiness, arrives this winter. Also joining us today is Craig Fitzgerald, Editorial Director. Craig leads IMN Editorial's strategy and oversees content for the company's customer email newsletter and social marketing service. In this role, he manages a team of writers who develop content for IMN customers. I would now like to turn things over to your moderator for today, CC Chapman. CC, you now have the floor.
Well, welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a lot of great content that we're going to be sharing with you. And I figured I'd start with this comic because it's one of those things that when people hear content marketing, they start thinking about sending out email blasts, press release, blog posts, and not really thinking about what it is they're sharing. And so I put this here to kind of make fun of the fact of what a lot of people think content marketing is. And we're going to spend a lot of time today focusing on what content marketing is really about, and it's not about this type of stuff. So what is content? I think that's the first thing we have to define. And when I define content, I say it's anything that you create and share to tell your story. Now, some people are probably out there right now listening and saying, well, I don't have a story to tell. I need to sell cars, or I need people in my financial institution. But you do have a story to tell. Everybody of every sort of business, every size business, has a story to tell. And when you're trying to figure out what kind of content to create, always lean back on the fact of, does this help me tell my story to the world? Because what makes you and your business who you are is unique to just you. And that's the story that needs to fill every piece of content you create. Now, one of the things you need to think about, and it's a mindset more than anything, is that you need to embrace that you are a publisher. If you live on the web in any capacity today, you are a publisher. Every piece of content you create, you're publishing it out there. The sooner you start thinking in this way, the sooner you're going to be more successful with your content marketing efforts. So as we step through everything today, you're going to hear us talk a lot about editorial calendars and planning out for different channels. And each piece of that is what it means to be a publisher. So keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward today and talk about the different capacities that you can use content marketing for. And now I'm going to turn it over to Craig.
Thanks, CC. I think if there's one thing that we'd like you to remember when you get through this today is this image. And you think about what your brick and mortar storefront looks like and what it looked like the first day you may have opened your business or your business was open. It was a blank slate. There's a white wall out front. There's maybe a van out front that you run errands with. And what you did was you put your name on that. You talked about what your services were and what what your products are on the side of the van. You put a sign out by the highway. All of that stuff is content. And what the interesting thing is, with all the outlets that you have available to you today, with social media and with email and every other avenue that you can choose to explore, you've got that same blank storefront out in front of any one of these types of media. So what are you going to fill it with, and what are the stories that you're going to generate that are going to help people understand about your business? And I think this looks like it's a daunting task when you look at it all as one big thing, but the key, I think, is to just do it, just get going, understand a little bit about what you're doing, set realistic goals, and then go from there. This is a few months ago. I was talking with the sales directors here, and we tried to. I was trying to explain to them, because they're out talking about content marketing when they're talking to customers of ours, and it's kind of a big topic to talk about when you might only have a few minutes with somebody. So what one of the sales directors asked me was, can you come up with an analogy that makes sense? That I can, sort of spit out in a couple of minutes that people are going to get. And this is the analogy that we came up with. We've all been to cocktail parties. We've all been to industry events where we meet a whole bunch of people that do very similar things. And, you run into three people at a cocktail party, and the first one essentially ignores you, doesn't even hand you a business card, doesn't make any eye contact, and leaves in 20 seconds. The second one All she does is talk about exactly what she does and what sales she's having this week and why she's better at what she does than everybody else. And then the third person that you meet kind of asks you some questions about yourself, tries to provide some interesting information about themselves. You find out you had a cousin that went to the same college, or you're a fan of the same baseball team. And that essentially is what content marketing is. It's an ability to engage with people who are interested in your business, but they're interested in a lot of businesses, and it allows you to become the most interesting person at that cocktail party. It is just a method of engaging with people outside of your daily business. Over the summer, we conducted a survey of industry professionals. We surveyed 3,000 people that were involved in the automotive, finance, direct selling and technology industries, marketing, communications managers, those type of people, to try and figure out how they use their content marketing programs and how they measure effectiveness and how they're engaging with customers today and how we might be able to help them improve through programs like this. So we came up with some good news and some not so great news. And I think the good news is great, and I think the not so great news is pretty good too, because I think that's where we can really help. The good news is what we found was that our respondents understood the concept of content marketing, sort of by and large. They sort of got what they were doing. They understood why it was important. And the people who responded to the survey were also involved in the content marketing strategy. So, they're the right people that we're talking to in a forum like this. And we also asked some questions about where the priority was for a content marketing program. Is it a high, medium, low priority? And sort of medium high priority is what we were trying to uncover. There were a few that said, nah, it's kind of a low priority for us, and I don't really know what the priority is, or it's not a priority at all. So that was a pretty small segment of our respondents. So that's I assume pretty good news, right, Cece? I mean, anything there that concerns you?
No, it was great to see, and it was awesome to see, even if you asked this question, if you asked it last summer, the summer before, these numbers would not be as high because people were not paying attention to content marketing as they are today. So it was great to see these numbers be as high as they were. So it's good news.
Good. So here's the not so good news, and this is like I don't want to cast this in a negative light. This is where I think that we're really going to be able to help. We asked a question about, do you have a content marketing strategy by channel? And what we mean by that is you have a lot of avenues to you. You might have a newsletter, you have a website, you have a blog, you have your Facebook and Twitter presences and other social media, YouTube, those kind of things. Do you have a content marketing strategy that addresses those different channels? And what we found out was that only about 27% actually do have a strategy, by channel, and the balance either no, we don't, definitely don't, or we don't know. So that's something that we're going to spend some time on to try and figure out, how those other channels are important to you. And then the other one is this is the one that sort of makes me stay up at night is the do you have a content marketing editorial calendar? And the vast majority, 60 some odd percent, either don't know or answered no, that they don't. And I think partially this is why a content marketing program in its entirety seems like a really difficult task for a lot of people, is because that editorial calendar isn't there. I edited a magazine for 7 years, and I, am responsible for, 300 some odd pieces of content coming out of here every month. And without an editorial calendar, there is no way that I'd be able to get it done. So, and I know, Cece, you're a writer.
It scares me, but it also doesn't surprise me, because I think a lot of people are, they're looking at content marketing and they're just going, oh, we're just going to throw out stuff and create stuff. And this is where we were talking earlier about having to embrace being a publisher. Part of that is looking at each channel separately, planning for it separately, and then executing across. And we're going to show examples of what an editorial calendar is. It's not something that anybody should be scared of, and in fact, it's going to make your content marketing much easier in the long run because you're not going to be pulling out your hair all night trying to figure out what to do next.
Absolutely. So this was one of the top challenges that we addressed here too. Was what challenges do you face when implementing a content marketing strategy? And we've sort of, this is common across industries. I think it's the ability to actually go out and find and source engaging content and internal restraints when producing that content. That's a huge number of the responses that we got here. There is another sliver in here about making sure that content passes regulatory compliance, and that's key for banks and credit unions and businesses in the financial sector. But it's also not necessarily regulatory compliance, but brand compliance when you're, for example, an auto dealer who is anticipating getting some co-op funds to pay for your marketing programs. Brand compliance is something that you need to worry about. It's not necessarily regulations, but government regulations. But in effect, these regulations are a little more strict and can cost you some pretty serious money over the course of a year if you don't pay attention to them. So, the big thing here is the ability to hire good talent and source that engaging content. And again, that's part of being a publisher and understanding what the resources are that are available to you out there. It's companies like us, but it's also there's a million resources out there that you have access to that can help you produce that content. And what we did from this survey is develop 4 key components for building customer loyalty and engagement through your content marketing. We've got 4 very vital components here that are going to really help you understand what your program's all about and how to make the most of it. The first thing here is develop a content plan that's in line with your goals. In the survey, we asked, what are your goals for a content marketing program? We gave a bunch of options here. There's no wrong answer here. It's just what you need to do is identify what your goal is and then develop content that surrounds that, or that promotes that. So if your goal is customer prospect engagement, you're going to have a little bit different content than you would if you're interested in being a thought leader in some whatever business that you're in. And Cece, let's talk a little bit about how the content differs from one of these goals to another.
Yeah, so you're creating content if you're new on the market. If you just set up your dealership or you're just opening up your shop, all your content is going to be focused on, look at me, this is what I do, this is why we're different than our competition, this is why you should buy from me. When you talk about customer loyalty, you've already got these people. They've bought your product or they've at least opted in to get more information from you. So they know who you are and they've got a relationship with you, in which case your content needs to shift more to keeping them engaged, maybe upselling them on something new. Maybe it's just keeping them informed on what it is, why you're the best at what you do. Too many people seem to forget that not only do you have to focus on creating content for different channels, but you have to focus on your different goals. So setting up front what your goal is and then focusing on that and developing for it is such a key critical part if you're going to be successful doing this.
So this next slide we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is sort of near and dear to my heart. It's optimizing content for multiple channels. This absolutely has to be part of your overall plan. And I want to give you a little example. You have a myriad of content channels that are available to you. You have newspaper ads, you have YouTube, you have a blog, you have social media channels like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest, and it's like there's another one every week. So let's just focus on 2 channels at very opposite ends of the spectrum. You have a blog, and you have a crazy uncle with an airplane who's going to tow a banner behind his airplane. So those two things, those two channels, you can provide content for. So on your blog, you may have some, relatively lengthy article about why it's a good time, or why it's a good time to refinance your house, for example, or the pros and cons of taking a home equity loan. That is an appropriate piece of content for your blog. That is not an appropriate piece of content for your uncle who's going to tow the banner behind his airplane. What you're going to put on that banner is sale Saturday, October 21st. Come on down, right? So you have fewer characters at your disposal. You have by nature, because you're 3,000 feet away from it, it has to be big and you have to be able to see it. You can't serve video on it. You can't show pictures on it. So those are just two very different pieces of editorial content that you're going to provide in those two different channels. So, Cece, give me, am I sort of completely off my nut here?
I just love, every time when you talk about an airplane pulling a banner, I haven't seen one of those in a while, but they're still, but it's a great analogy because it works towards, if you're looking at like Twitter and blogging, I mean, when you tweet something, you have 140 characters to get it out there. So you're right, you do not have the time to put all the details in there. You're kind of teasing people. You're hoping that whatever you say and then hyperlink to is enough that someone's going to go, ooh, what is that? And click through to your blog post or Facebook or sending them to another channel. Whereas on your blog, you've got all this space to put as much content as you want. It can be rich, it can be long, it can be videos, photography, whatever it is you want. Same goes for Facebook. It allows for much more robust details than you're used to. And that's why you have to think about these different channels, because a tweet is going to fly by somebody's screen. You've only got those 148 characters, and you're fighting for everybody else's attention. They follow other people besides just you. So whenever you're creating this content, make sure that it stands out and is appropriate for the channel, and use the channel to its fullest capacity.
Yeah, it's interesting. The things that we've learned over the last year and a half, and there are studies that back this up, is that especially on Facebook, photography rather than video is a key component to engagement on Facebook only. It really, it works on blogs too, but specifically Facebook, the engagement around photography is significantly higher than it is around text and it is around video. There's a reason that you still want to have text, and there's a reason that you want to get people to link back to your blog and your website. Obviously, you want to, always want to be driving that traffic back somewhere. Getting people to take some kind of action. But if you post an engaging photograph on Facebook, the engagement around that is significantly higher. And those posts are, they're self-contained. And there's some sort of key things around Facebook that you want to pay attention to that we'll talk a little bit more about in the metrics here. And then you've got channels like newsletters. Newsletters are, I think, most akin to a blog post. So, you kind of want to do both. And I think what you definitely can do is utilize one blog post or one piece of newsletter content as the anchor. And then you can take tweets out of that. So, for example, you write a blog post on winter tires, and you've got the opportunity then to say, hey, there's sort of 6 highlights that we want to talk about in this longer article. I can get 6 tweets out of that. Did you know that? Did you know this is what this symbol means on the side of your tire? Click here to find out. Or did you know the difference between a mud and snow tire and a winter tire? Click here to find out. There are multiple different opportunities to get people over to that longer piece of content and learn more about you. And then the newsletter is exactly the same way, with the added benefit of, if you have a decent newsletter program, you're going to have metrics behind that. Because those people are subscribers, you're going to know who they are, you're going to know what they read, you're going to know where they went, and you're able to then sort of custom tailor follow-up type responses to them that drive an offer a little further down the pipeline. You read this winter tire story, you clicked on this winter tire special. we'll fire off something to you that says, hey, come in now and we'll do the mountain balance for free or whatever it is. So it's just an opportunity to get those people in a much closer period to buying. This is the editorial calendar part. This is what I live and breathe with every single day. My editorial calendar is, you can go from as simple as something like this. That's an Excel spreadsheet. If you have a WordPress blog, there are plugins that allow you to run an editorial calendar on a WordPress blog, which is very handy. But keep it simple. This is really basic. There are days listed here and dates, and this is sort of blog centric. So you sort of replace newsletter with blog or Facebook with Twitter here, you'd sort of get the idea. But basically, what these are very very general topics. So blog topic, blog title. So that's sort of that's key to getting people to understanding what this story is about. You've got to tell them exactly what they're going to get. Don't try to get fancy with headlines. Tell them what they're going to get. And there's some notes in here and some keywords that you're going to want to input. Any links that you want to have in there that you don't want to forget about. Images that you want to use. And then the last column here is a tweet. So it's okay, this particular piece of content is about the basics of a social media editorial calendar. The tweet might be, hey, learn how to develop an editorial calendar. Pretty simple, straightforward. You may be able to get 3 or 4 tweets out of a piece of content. What do you think?
No, and the great thing, too, is that if you're laying this out for the next week or the next month, especially if you're in a situation where you have multiple people creating the content, or you do need some sign-off for regulation or brand compliance, you can show, here's what we're talking about for the next month across all channels. And it focuses your energy and your time. And the great thing about this, as shown in this example, is it's not high-tech. People hear editorial calendar and they start freaking out. It's just a spreadsheet. It's a very simple spreadsheet. And the great thing is, if you use something, Google Docs or something like that where your team can collaborate on it, whatever works for you, multiple people could be managing this at a time. But what's great is laying out the different channels and say, hey, we got this blog post, and then figuring out, well, wait a minute, we can leverage that and reimagine it in 6 different ways across Pinterest and Twitter and Facebook and all these social networks. So you figure out how to create that piece of content once, and then how you're going to promote it and link to it across different channels. And it focuses you, if nothing else.
Yeah, and if you sort of back up the complexity here a little bit, if you had a date and a topic.
Yeah.
That's all you need. That's a start. And what it does is it really boils down your program to manageable tasks that take place once a week or once a month. And what we find is time and time again, a business will get a Facebook page. They'll get 30 or 40 fans. They'll post hot and heavy every day for 2 weeks. And then 6 months will go by before anybody posts again. And it's because there's not this calendar staring you in the face every day. First thing when you get up in the morning, first thing when you come in, it's the first thing I look at when I come in every day is like, okay, what do I have to do for today? What do I have to do for the next week? And I have to tell you, I am the most disorganized person on the planet, but this is the one thing that I've been able to do that really gets me to continue with this and to not miss anything and not let anything fall through the cracks. It's absolutely critical, and I think that without that, you lose that engagement because time goes by and people kind of forget about you. And then the fourth thing here is measuring your success. You can go out there with this is interesting because I came from the print world, so newspapers like the Boston Globe, and I worked for Hemmings Motor News for 7 years. And when you're publishing a magazine, you have or a newspaper, you basically have 2 metrics. You have what's sold on the newsstand and what's my subscription rate. That's it. Those are the only metrics I know about. I don't know what performed well. I have to wait a month after I ship a magazine to find out, what was successful and what wasn't successful. You have so many metrics available to you through Google Analytics, through Twitter Analytics, Facebook Insights, and your newsletter program to measure and really understand the things that work and the things that don't work. I mean, understanding that is just as critical. Am I wrong?
Yeah, and the other thing, the key part about why you have to measure your success is content marketing is not something you're going to do for a month and then turn it off. It is a long-term play. It's something you have to keep feeding and keep doing on a regular basis. And by looking at your stats, you can see, well, wow, look at this. Photo posts are working really well, but maybe these long-form journalistic approaches we thought about doing are not. So maybe we need to do more photo posts. And the only way you're going to figure that out is by looking at the metrics under the covers. And the great thing is, any newsletter software worth the money you're paying for has to have the analytics in there. Google Analytics can be plugged into any website you're running. Facebook gives it to you by default. I mean, these tools are out there. They're there, and if you're not looking at them, you have no idea if you're succeeding or not. So don't judge. I've seen too many people go, well, we look at YouTube likes, and that's one metric. You should look at that for sure, but that's not your only metric you should look at. So make sure up front when you're starting things, figure out what it is how you're going to measure success. Because again, that if you're up front trying to build an audience, your success is much more about impressions. How many people saw your stuff? When you're talking about customers, loyalty. Well, how many sales leads came from this piece of content? You may judge things differently. So always be looking at the metrics, but how you actually measure success is going to evolve over time.
Yeah, and it's key too to not sort of write anything off because one thing didn't work
right.
one time. That was the lesson from publishing the magazine is you can't please everybody all the time. It's just impossible to do that. So there are things that are going to be successful and not so successful. But they will get some engagement with somebody. The craziest things that you never thought anybody would ever remember again are things that, when I was on the road with the magazine, people would come up to me and say, oh, geez, that story that you guys wrote or that little news piece, I never forgot that. And, it was just, it was really gratifying to understand. And that's the thing about metrics. The key thing is it's a really good way to measure what's working and what's not working, and you get that feedback without actually talking to people. But it's just an added benefit that you get that I didn't necessarily get when I was working for a print publication. So we're sort of at the conclusion here, and I want to open it up to Q&A in just a minute here, but I want to kind of wrap up what we talked about. The four key goals here are to build a content marketing plan that's in line with the goals that you have, optimize that content for multiple channels, create an editorial calendar that sort of fixes your vision a little bit on what it is you need to do on a regular basis, and then measure your success. And I think if there's one major overarching goal here, it's just to do it. Just, it's trite, it's Nike's slogan, but just do it really works. And whether it's, daily or weekly or monthly or whatever it is that you do, it's key to do it and stay with it because, as CC mentioned, this is a marathon, and you're going to have to understand this for the long term. And the better you get at it, the easier it's going to be to transition to a daily update or a weekly update that's going to get that content out there to more and more people. So. Oh yeah. So the other thing that we talked about too was sourcing content. We had talked about that pretty significantly in a webinar that we had done a few months ago. There are multiple sources of content that you can utilize. There are free sources of content that work, but that aren't tailored for your business. There are paid sources of content that are really reasonably priced, that are really good, solid content that will engage your customers. And then there's your own internal resources. I think that's something that's absolutely key to understanding is, if you can get, we internally here have a blog called Content Counts at IMN, and if that was just me or just one person in the marketing department developing all that content for that, it would be kind kind of an impossible task. But again, with that editorial calendar, you kind of sketch out, well, this guy's interested in writing about this. He's not going to want to do it every week, but if he can do it once a month, then we can start to build around that and understand. So I think internal resources are absolutely key. And even if you have some kind of a newsletter program like IMN's, where you get solid, rich, engaging content as part of the program, it's always better to add content that really fixes your own business as the primary person who that piece of content is coming from. So keep that in mind as well. So
yeah, and the only other thing I would add to that is realize that you're not going to be able to create everything on your own, and you're probably not going to enjoy creating everything on your own. One of the things I know in my book that one of the rules we talk about is to find your strengths. So figure out who on your team enjoy. Maybe someone likes taking photos. Maybe someone enjoys video. Empower them to create some content for you and see how it goes. But then over time, as you start creating content, you're going to figure out, here's where we're lacking, where we need help. We need help on creating these sorts of content. And that's when you can go out and find the people and the resources to help you create it. There's freelancers creating content of all sorts, and there's companies big and small that'll help you. But until you have that plan that we talked about building, and you know what's going to be on your editorial calendar and the types of things you'd like to create, if you don't do that planning up front, you're never going to know what type of help you need. So that's why we're big advocates for making sure that up front you figure out what our plan is, how we're going to achieve success, and then being able to figure out, okay, this is where we need help on these three things. So that's why planning is so crucial. And I think now we're going to take some questions.
Yeah, we're going to take some questions, and actually the first question we have here is sort of related exactly to that topic. Can you please talk further about the different different approaches based on goals? Namely, our goals are twofold: engagement and then established thought leadership. The graphic that we showed those that are wildly different approaches, and they absolutely are. So yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. I think what Cece mentioned was that engagement is that outreach program, and I don't know exactly what your business is here, but pick a topic, right? So my biggest thing is automotive stuff. It's where I've kind of come from. So you're a tire shop, for example, and you want to engage you want to keep your customers engaged, and I think and it's more than just customers. I think at that level it's prospect engagement and getting people to remember who you are. I guess there's an example I can give of we live in Massachusetts here, and there's a what do you call it, a landscape supply company out on Route 9 in Westboro that always had some kind of interesting commentary on their sign out in front of the business, right out on Route 9. And I can't remember the name of the business off the top of my head, but I could go there tomorrow and show you where that sign is. And if I was a landscaper, or if I was looking for interested, if I was looking for a business that I could remember what they did, that's the business that I would engage with. I think you see the same kind of things in attorneys and accountants who provide some kind of legal advice for in little news, their little paid advertisements in newspapers. I think they do the same kind of thing. That's the point, is that you want to try to get that engagement. Get people to remember who you are. The thought leadership thing, Cece, why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Thought leadership is easily the hardest way to go down the content marketing route, I think. It's also one of the most rewarding. But the problem with being a thought leader is you've got to really know your stuff. Your content has to be rock solid every time. It has to be really unique as well. And it takes a long time, because you're not going to become a quote-unquote thought leader overnight. So as you're planning that out, thought leadership is great, because if you become the thought leader in whatever industry you're in, or one of the thought leaders, people are going to show up at your door. They're going to be there buying your product and service. They're going to be reading your content. They're going to be sharing it on a regular basis. But it takes a lot of time. And So if you're going to start doing that, really you have to plan out what you're doing the next month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months down the road. It takes even more planning for thought leadership because you have to be creating that content. You can't just whip up a thought leadership post every morning. It doesn't work that way. It has to be well crafted. You should also be thinking more about webinars and white papers and doing surveys and something that you can only bring to the table, something much more richer than just a blog post. And that takes more time, but it is more rewarding.
Yeah, and there's that opportunity too where there might be a trade publication that specifically covers what you're interested in, and there are for every print trade publication there are 1,000 online trade publications that are doing very well and that people read on a regular basis. If you become the go-to guy, it's like being your own PR agency in a way. Trying to, it is a long process. But once you get, I think you look at like who ABC News calls whenever there's some military conflict somewhere in the world. It's the same 4 people, and that's a thought leader. Those are the kind of that's the game that you need to play in essence is what is it that I'm focused on. And then how do I sort of, make sure that I'm touching those people on a regular basis with, it's almost like a different audience that you're trying to reach. Was there a, click on that. There you go. Okay. Okay. Do you have a preferred platform for blasting content across multiple channels? Well, I would encourage you not to blast to multiple channels. And what I mean by that is there are tools like Sendable, for example, or TweetDeck, for example, that allow you to post one piece of content and have it go to multiple channels. But the disadvantage is that it's the same piece of content for your tweet as it is for your Facebook post. So in a way that's okay, but you've got to link it back to some kind of larger piece of content, whether it's a newsletter or whether it's a blog post. But I mean, that's, I sort of would stay away from blasting content anyways, and really try to figure out who it is you're trying to communicate with and target them with content that you think that they'd be interested in.
And I agree fully. I mean, I know I use Exact Target Social Exchange, which used to be CoTweet, and I use that to cross-post platform so I can manage it in one place, but I never blast it out. I write the content for this morning. I wrote a blog post about a trip I recently went on, but when I tweeted it out, when I posted it to Facebook, I used that one program to publish to both places, but I wrote the content for each platform individually because blasting it out, let's face it, because the other problem with that is while it may be easier for you, you probably have some of the same followers on those multiple channels. And if at the same exact time they all can see the same verbiage goes flying across all the networks, nobody likes that. You want to create something that's going to pop out on Facebook, something that I would also advise spreading out the time a little bit. If you write a blog post, people are going to read that at different times, but if you tweet it and Facebook at the same time, why not tweet it, wait an hour, Facebook it? But there are plenty of tools out there that do that, but it's bad form. It's not going to get you the results that you're hoping for, and it's not worth the money. So find a tool that allows you to cross-post, and manage things from a management perspective so you can see, oh, I did post that to Facebook, but I totally forgot to tweet it. That's okay, but blasting out across multiple channels is not going to get you the results you're hoping for.
Yeah, look at those as almost like it's a scheduling tool, it's a management tool, and it saves you from having to log in multiple different places. That's what those tools are for, and I think what they've become is, hey, I can just throw up one piece of content somewhere and just hit every possible channel, and that's kind of where we want to lead you away from and really try to dedicate content to those specific channels. Is there anything else? Where do you suggest we find different sorts of content for car dealerships? Well, it sort of depends on what that channel is. So there's a couple of different things that I'll mention to you. I mean, first of all, I'm going to throw in a pitch for IMN for your newsletter. I mean, there's ample content that's sort of local to your dealership and then involved with the the products that you sell. So I'd sort of point you in that direction. But there's something that you need to be aware of when you're talking about Facebook and Twitter, and there's that fine line between what is content curation and what is plagiarism, right? So there is a ton of content out there on the web that may be very interesting to people who are interested in communicating with your dealership. For example, somebody does a really nice review of a car that you sell. You absolutely have the ability to link to that content. You can you need to be careful about it, but you can quote it as long as you've provided proper attribution. You can, if it's a YouTube video, you can share it through your social media channel, but you can't just pick it up and say, oh, I'm going to use this in my newsletter and I'm going to copy and paste it verbatim, even if I give credit to the writer. That's not the way it works. You need to be careful about that, and that's the kind of thing that a company like IMN, there are other companies out there too that sort of provide a backstop and that are really, really aware of that kind of thing when we provide content. But you need to be careful about that as well. But sharing, I think if you sort of look around, if you're a car dealership and you read about the business, there's ample content out there that you can share that is absolutely appropriate and that people who communicate with your dealership are going to be interested in seeing. There are a couple of things you want to be careful about, like I mentioned plagiarism a little bit, but I'll also mention Consumer Reports and J.D. Power. Both of those companies have pretty strict no commercial use policies, which say that, and I'm not even sure how Consumer Reports, most of that stuff is behind a paywall, so you can't even link to it. So, just be aware of that. I would sort of, anything that said Consumer Reports on it, I'd stay away from. Anything that said J.D. Power on it that wasn't coming from your OEM as part of, your overall marketing for that car, I would stay away from because they have really strict no commercial use policies. That's kind of inside baseball a little bit, but you want to be aware of it. But sharing, look for a piece of content. If they have a share button on there, share away. Figure out a way to do that. Write a little bit of an introduction that says, hey, we found this great article. Check out what Car and Driver had to say about this car and link out to it. That's absolutely appropriate, and that sort of makes you into a content curator, which is a little bit different than a content creator, but curation is its own its own content engine, really. And
also, for car dealerships, but this will work for anybody. One of the best and easiest, if you're looking to start for create content, is make your customers the hero. Shine a light on them. The next time someone comes in and buys a car, say, hey, can we take a picture of you and get your thoughts on what you thought, or videotape them, That content is gold when you push it out to Facebook or your newsletter. Janie came in today and her parents bought her first car for college graduation. Take a picture. People love that stuff, that sort of, that personal, touchy, from the heart story everybody loves. There's no reason you can't do that for whatever business you're in. Johnny came in today to open up a Christmas account at the bank, trying to save money to buy presents. There's so many ways you can go with that. And that can be done with, your smartphone you have sitting around. You can shoot a video or shoot a picture and put that, granted, get the permission, make sure all that, get that in line. So it's a great way you can get started with very easy content that nobody else has, because that person is buying your product or service. And people love, and trust me, you can say how awesome you are over and over again, but when somebody else says it for you, it's worth its weight in gold. That's the type of stuff you want, where someone says, I buy my product from this person because. Those are the things you live for in content. So start creating some of it.
We have another question. How can social media work for a financial company? And I don't know what the specifics are here, but I'm going to give one really good example. Bank rate is a really good example. It's probably competitive with you if you're if you're a bank. So I apologize for that. But they do an exceptional job providing content around something that is essentially not necessarily top of mind for most people as they go through their day. So I'm a fan of Bankrate on Facebook. I get a piece of content from them at least once a day, and all it is a simple question. Are you saving for your next vacation? I off the top of my head, I can't come up with any, sort of good, do you have a Christmas account? Would you, actually one of the questions today was, would you put an advertisement on your house if it helped pay for your mortgage? So, like literally yes and no questions that had sort of, a little bit, invited people to comment and speculate and all that kind of thing. Of all the companies out there that are sort of, in that business of finding the best rates for mortgages and all that kind of stuff, it's the one that I kind of go back to on a regular basis because they just provide me interesting content all the time. And that's the thing, it doesn't take a talented writer to come up with that. It's just a very basic question every day, and I think they do a great job with it.
And another great way to do that works for financials, but it works for anybody, is I'm assuming, not knowing anything about you, everybody's got questions about financial institutions, whether it's bank rates, whether it's how do I pay for a mortgage. Right now I'm trying to figure out how to refinance a house, and I'm going out to Google and typing in how to refinance a house. Think about the questions that you get asked on a regular basis. Take the top 10 questions you get asked and create a blog post or a video response for every one of those questions. You've got, because I guarantee you, I don't care what business you're in, you have 10 common questions your salespeople get asked on a daily basis. Create content around them, put them out there, make the subject line be the question, or put it in them, and then when you put it on Facebook, say, hey, everything you've ever wondered about refinancing a house, here, Susie answers your question about that and link to the video. There's lots of ways you can do it. And then the good thing about that, not only are people searching and going to find it, but when somebody watches it and views it, and they see a friend ask a similar question, and go, hey, you know what? I saw so-and-so. Let me go grab that for you. And they're going to share the link with them. And that's the true power of social media.
Yeah, one of the things it's in particularly regarding life insurance, and I know there's like 5 questions that I probably have.
Oh, yeah.
I could get you on the phone and bore you to tears in the next 20 minutes about life insurance, and it's an opportunity to figure out what it is. You're getting the same questions on a regular basis. How do I develop some kind of a content program around that? Staying within the regulatory guidelines that you may have, and just keeping it very basic for people, and not making it a huge heavy lift. Really try to boil it down to the 5 or 10 things that. In the publishing industry, there's something known as evergreen content.
Yep.
It's every single year people are asking the same questions about 401ks. Every single year people are asking the same questions about taxes, around the same time of year. So then, that kind of pre-fills your editorial calendar a little bit too. There's the one thing you asked specifically about social media. The one thing I want to mention with social media is don't get discouraged that you have, 40 fans and you kind of stay there for a little while. Don't get discouraged with that, because you've got to start somewhere. And if you're a local business, or even if you're sort of, small to medium-sized business in a larger locality, you gotta start there. And those, I've seen a lot of businesses, we have 200,000 likes, and you're a car dealership in Idaho and you have 200,000 likes. You don't have 200,000 people that you're selling cars to in your market. So in a way, it's good for you, because if you're providing interesting content, people are sharing it. Other people that are in your locality are seeing it. That's great. I don't want to discount that, but I also want to make sure that if you have 40 likes, you work those 40 likes, and you provide them content that's going to be meaningful to them. And if you get to 150 likes, it's 150 people that are interested in your business. I keep going back to the magazine, but I ran the Facebook presence for the magazine. That was, I think a lot of people, at that time looked at that like it was competitive with the magazine, because we sold the magazine, we wanted you to pay for it, and yet we're giving away some content for free. it was always content that was outside of the what was in the magazine, but related to it. But we started out with a really, really small group of fans. I mean, like in the hundreds, and we had 75,000 people that were paid. That was our paid circulation. So, it was a little discouraging to look at first, but that grew very naturally and very organically. And I think that when you do things like that, when you grow a fan base organically, it makes a huge difference in the end in the type of content and the quality of content that you provide, rather than trying to get out there and just buy a bunch of likes and advertise and get sponsored links and all that kind of stuff. Start with the content and work your way out from there.
Amen. Yeah, totally agree.
I'm trying to think. I think that may be the last question. I hope we got everybody's question here. I really, really appreciate everybody hanging in there with us for 51 minutes now. I want to thank Cece, who it's an honor to sort of share the speakerphone with him. And I just wanted to mention, too, after the webinar, you'll receive a link for the recorded webinar, and you'll also get a copy of a white paper that we're generating at the moment. So there's sort of more to come and more detailed information in there. So I hope this was useful for everybody. I really appreciate everybody hanging in there with us. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending the webinar today. If you have any questions that did not get answered today, please feel free to email Craig. You can expect to receive the IMN How Engaged Are Your Customers complimentary white paper shortly following this webinar by email. Thank you for joining today and have a great day.